everyone, I'm Caro, and welcome to The Mental Traveler. Today I'm once again gonna do a book review about a novel set in the Star Wars universe, and that book would be Survivor's Quest by Timothy Zahn. And I have to say that I really loved it, though I'll be telling you why later. It came out in 2004, but before I go into details regarding the book, I think I should say that this book belongs to the Star Wars Expanded Universe, or Legends, and I ought to mention what that means. So let me just quickly explain that before Episode 7 came out, a lot of authors were writing books that had to do with events that occur after Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. And one of the most famous of these authors was Timothy Zahn. He was actually sort of the pioneer in this trend, and a lot of authors wrote their books based on his work. But anything that those authors wrote before The Force Awakens came out is not canon. What we see in the movies is the official version of what happens to the Skywalkers. I can recommend you guys that before you read Survivor's Quest, you catch up on other of Timothy Zahn's works, for example, the Throne Trilogy or the Hand of Throne duology, and particularly Outbound Flight, because it deals with the same characters as in Survivor's Quest, and it's the same setting only 50 years prior to the start of Survivor's Quest, which is set around 18 years after Return of the Jedi. I should mention though that Han Solo, Princess Leia, Chewbacca, and Lando Calrissian do not appear in Survivor's Quest. This is only a book with Luke Skywalker and a whole bunch of original characters created by Timothy Zahn. Finally, this will be a book review full with spoilers. It's very complicated to explain the plot of this story, since there are a lot of references to history and events and characters that appear in other of Timothy Zahn's prior works. So instead, I'm just going to give a very general overall idea of what the plot is about. It begins with Luke Skywalker and his wife and fellow Jedi, Mara Jade, being invited aboard this expedition to the remains of Outbound Flight, and they have been invited by the Chiss, aliens that look a lot like humans, but they have blue skin and red eyes. And one of the most famous Chiss of all times is Grand Admiral Thrawn, who appears in previous novels by the same author. And this voyage to Outbound Flight is very important because for 50 years, everyone thought that Grand Admiral Thrawn had destroyed Outbound Flight in this big battle, but instead, the remains of Outbound Flight have been discovered lying on a planet. This is a very important discovery for a lot of people, both in the New Republic and outside of it. But what exactly is Outbound Flight? After the events we see in Episode 1, Phantom Menace, there was this group of Jedi who decided, along with 50,000 people from the Old Republic, that they were fed up with the government and wanted to go to the unknown regions of the galaxy and find somewhere new they could settle and establish a new government. But once Grand Admiral Thrawn learned about it, he went over and supposedly destroyed the spaceship before anyone could even leave the galaxy and discover a new place to settle in. Once Luke Skywalker and his companions arrived at the remnants of Outbound Flight, this ghost ship, they discovered the ship was not only not destroyed, but a lot of people survived the attack. So through generations, the survivors of Outbound Flight have been trapped in this big spaceship for 50 years and have formed their own civilization in order to survive, and hence the title Survivor's Quest, Luke Skywalker going to find the survivors of Outbound Flight. But as I mentioned, this is just an overall idea of what the story is about. It's full of plot twists and surprises, and it's full of danger for Luke Skywalker and his wife Mara Jade, and in the end, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Though I must say that at times it even seemed like a detective story, sort of like Murder on the Orient Express, and Luke and Mara were these detectives trying to find out who were the villains in the story. There are a lot of reasons why I loved this book, but I think the first one could be my interest for Luke Skywalker grew. Before, I never particularly liked him. I prefer Anakin and Padme or Han Solo and Princess Leia. But once Luke meets his wife, he started to grow on me, and I really like his interactions with Mara Jade. And in Survivor's Quest, they've already been married for 3 years. The dynamic between them is really cool. Since they're both so powerful in the Force, it's really interesting to see how a married couple who are Jedi can really connect to each other. But another thing that the author addressed, something that I had been wondering about during some of his previous works. As I've said in other videos, my second favorite thing in the Star Wars universe is the love affair between Padme and Anakin. And I just love how there's this big obstacle to their love because he's a Jedi and Jedi Jedi aren't allowed to marry, so they can't be together officially because of it. But once Luke, their son, is grown up and he's basically the only Jedi in the galaxy, he disregards the old Jedi rule of not marrying and goes off and marries Mara Jade. So I was wondering if he would ever think about this, and in this book he does. He wonders if he didn't make a mistake by disregarding the old Jedi rule of not forming attachments. And I also really like the fact that in Survivor's Quest we get a lot of insight into the way the Empire worked when Darth Sidious was the Emperor. For example, in the movies it had never occurred to me that Palpatine apparently hated aliens and thought humans were superior to other races. And regarding Timothy Zahn's writing, I really enjoy the fact that a lot of his original characters grow throughout the story. For example, there's this old man who hated his Jedi sister when he was little, but then in Survivor's Quest, he has to encourage this little girl to embrace the fact that she is force sensitive. And speaking of Jedi, another really cool aspect in Survivor's Quest is that the survivors of Outbound Flight hate Jedi, and if a children is born into their society that is force sensitive, they think he or she is a pariah and basically put them on quarantine and exile them from their society. So it was really interesting to see the Jedi from that point of view. And the last thing would be that I finally enjoyed one of Timothy Zahn's endings. In his previous books, I always think that he rushes through the climax and the ending of his novels. That's all for today. I hope you guys enjoyed my book review for Survivor's Quest by Timothy Zahn, and I have also now been encouraged to either read the book or reread the novel. Let me know what you think of it. I want to hear from you all. You can find in the description box below a link to the Goodreads page for Survivor's Quest. I'm Kara the Mental Traveler, and I'll be seeing you soon. Have a good week. May the Force be with you.